The bounty hunters lounged in the neon haze of a starport bar, laughing over their latest kills. Tall reptilian KRYTH warriors, sleek and cybernetically enhanced Thari, and the behemoth-like Vorns slouched over tankards of viscous, glowing liquors, exchanging tales of their conquests. The mere mention of human criminals had them roaring with amusement. "They call him the Boogeyman," one of them wheezed, barely containing his laughter. "An Earth-born fugitive, feared by other humans. How dangerous could he be?" Marcus Grayson, leaning against the bar, let them talk. His crew, DeAndre Bishop, Luis Ramirez, Jack Calloway, and Wyatt Buchanan, exchanged silent glances. They had heard the stories, but they didn't laugh. They'd seen what desperate men were capable of. The job had come through encrypted channels, offering a bounty that dwarfed anything they had taken before. The Boogeyman wasn't just any fugitive, he was an anomaly. No confirmed image, no consistent methodology. He had escaped from maximum security prisons across 3 star systems, leaving behind only dead or broken hunters. No one who had seen him lived to describe him. "Why do they call him that?" DeAndre finally asked, swirling his drink. An alien bounty hunter, a scarred KRYTH, leaned in. "Because he's a ghost. No one sees him coming. He doesn't just kill, he haunts his targets. He turns their own fears against them." Louis scoffed. "Sounds like a man. Men bleed." The KRYTH's frills fluttered. "Maybe, but so far, he has done nothing but make hunters disappear." Marcus exhaled, pushing his drink aside. "Then we go in knowing we're next on his list." The coordinates led them to Delta 9, a dying world on the fringes of civilization. Once a prosperous mining colony, it had been abandoned after a planetary war turned it into a wasteland of shattered structures and toxic dust storms. Now it was home to criminals, warlords, and those who preferred to be forgotten. The moment they landed, Marcus felt it, the weight of unseen eyes. The city's inhabitants were hardened men and alien cutthroats, but even they tensed at the mention of the Boogeyman. "You're looking for him?" one scarred merchant asked, voice barely above a whisper. "Turn around. There's nothing but death ahead." "Let us worry about that," Wyatt said, adjusting the brim of his hat. The first lead came from a dying bounty hunter. His exosuit was torn open, blood seeping into the rusted floor. "We thought we had him," he rasped. "Then he was behind us. One by one gone." His breathing shuddered. "You don't hunt him. He hunts you." Jack hacked into the local security grid, but there were no reliable feeds. The cameras had either been fried or fed loops of empty corridors. "He's erasing himself," Jack muttered. "Everything we think we know about him is what he wants us to know." DeAndre frowned. "So how do we catch a ghost?" Marcus looked out over the ruined city. "We don't chase him. We make him come to us." They established a false pattern, moving through abandoned buildings, leaving just enough of a trail to suggest vulnerability. They split into staggered groups, forcing the Boogeyman to divide his focus. They monitored thermal scans, seismic activity, anything that might give them an edge. Then the first strike came. Luis was securing their fallback position when his comms cut to static. By the time they reached him, his rifle lay discarded, his gear torn apart. He was alive barely. "He's playing with us," Luis gasped, clutching his side. "Like a cat with mice." Marcus knelt beside him. "What did you see?" Luis shook his head. "Nothing. 1 second I was alone, the next, he was there." The Boogeyman had left no footprints, no trace of his movements. But he had left something else, a message scrawled on the wall in Luis's own blood. "I see you." DeAndre exhaled slowly. "We're not hunting a man. We're hunting something worse." The laughter of the alien bounty hunters echoed in Marcus's mind. They wouldn't be laughing for long. The wind howled through the ruined city, carrying the acrid scent of decay. Luis lay unconscious in their makeshift shelter, his wounds patched but deep. The Boogeyman had spared him. Not out of mercy, out of mockery. Marcus stared at the blood-scrawled message on the wall. "I see you." He had been hunted before. Insurgents, warlords, fanatics, men who thought they were ghosts. But this was different. The Boogeyman wasn't just evading them. He was studying them, picking at the edges of their formation, learning their movements before striking. "Whatever he is," Jack muttered, working furiously to re-establish their perimeter, "he's not working alone." Marcus glanced at him. You think there's more than one? No, Jack said, shaking his head. I think he's using the whole city. Every dead zone, every ruined corridor. It's like he designed the battlefield himself. Wyatt paced, rifle in hand. He's good, I'll give him that. But no man's perfect. He tilted his head at Marcus. So what's the play, Cap? Marcus exhaled. The Boogeyman had chosen this place for a reason. That meant there was a pattern, something they could disrupt. We force him into our kind of fight. DeAndre grunted. Yeah, and what's our kind of fight? Marcus looked at Luis, pale and breathing shallowly. The kind where we stop playing defense. They set the trap at dusk. Instead of hunting the Boogeyman, they made themselves the perfect prey. They moved loudly, deliberately, making just enough mistakes to be noticed. Jack manipulated the failing security grid, feeding in false data, heat signatures that weren't there, movement that led nowhere. The Boogeyman had been toying with them. Now they would toy with him. The first sign that he had taken the bait was the silence. Marcus felt it first. A shift in the air, an unnatural stillness settling over the ruins. The distant wails of the wind faded, the ever-present hum of the city's decay dulled to nothing. Then came the whisper. Not over their comms. Not through any device. A voice, low and measured, cutting through the stillness. You think you're different? Jack's hands froze over his datapad. DeAndre's grip tightened on his rifle. Wyatt muttered a curse. You think you're hunters, the voice continued, its tone neither mocking nor angry, just curious. That's what they all think. Marcus didn't speak. He gestured to Jack, who started tracing the signal. I was like you once, the voice said. A soldier. A killer. You spend enough time in the dark, you become it. DeAndre whispered, is he broadcasting? Jack shook his head. No. No comms, no tech. It's like he's... The building exploded. The blast threw Marcus off his feet, heat and shrapnel slicing through the air. His ears rang as he rolled to cover, rifle up, scanning for movement. Smoke poured through the crumbling walls, firelight casting jagged shadows. Wyatt was already firing, his rifle tracing a phantom in the smoke. Eyes on. A blur of movement, then nothing. DeAndre swung around a corner, weapon raised. Where'd he go? A blade flashed. DeAndre barely managed to twist away, the knife carving a line across his shoulder instead of his throat. He fired point-blank, but the Boogeyman was already gone, melting into the smoke. Marcus steadied his breathing. The Boogeyman wasn't retreating. He was weaving through them, striking and vanishing before they could react. Jack's voice crackled through the comms. He's jamming me, I can't. A second explosion rocked the structure, sending debris cascading from above. Marcus moved instinctively, sprinting through the haze toward the last place he had seen their attacker. He caught a glimpse, a figure moving low and fast, almost inhuman in its precision. Marcus fired. The shot slammed into a wall, inches from target. The Boogeyman never hesitated, never flinched. Then he spoke again. You're learning, he said. Good. Marcus snarled, moving to flank, but by the time he turned the corner, the space was empty. Only a single mark remained, scratched into the stone with something impossibly sharp. A countdown. 48 hours. Wyatt exhaled sharply. The hell is that supposed to mean? Jack, finally recovering his systems, checked his scanner. His face paled. It's a challenge, he said. We're not hunting him anymore. He just gave us the time limit. Marcus wiped soot from his face and looked at the shattered battlefield. They had walked into his world and barely survived the first encounter. But something had changed. The Boogeyman wasn't just toying with them. He was testing them. And that meant, for the first time, they had a chance to beat him. The city lay in ruin, but the battlefield was finally shifting. The Boogeyman had given them 48 hours, not a threat, but an invitation. He had been in control from the moment they arrived, guiding their movements, deciding when and where to strike. Now Marcus intended to take that control back. They didn't waste time licking their wounds. Luis was stable but out of the fight. DeAndre's shoulder was bandaged, Wyatt had a concussion he refused to acknowledge, and Jack worked in silence, fingers flying across his datapad as he rebuilt their compromised systems. Marcus stood at the edge of their shelter, watching the city. The boogeyman had left them a puzzle, and he had no intention of playing by the expected rules. He's not just fast, DeAndre muttered, rolling his arm, testing his injury. He knows us. Knows how we move, how we think. Then we change, Marcus said. Wyatt exhaled through his teeth. And how exactly do we do that? Marcus knelt, tracing a line in the dust. He's a ghost because he's never where we expect him to be. But he still has rules. Patterns. A man doesn't move like that without discipline. Jack's fingers hesitated over his keyboard. You think he's ex-military? Maybe, Marcus admitted. Or something worse. Jack's screen flickered, data scrolling too fast to read. I've been running environmental scans. He's not just disappearing. He's using this city like it's a goddamn exosuit. Collapsed tunnels, ventilation shafts, structural weaknesses. He's built a path through this place that no one else can use. Marcus studied the map forming on Jack's display. Then we break the path. They moved out in silence, splitting into two teams. Jack and DeAndre worked from a distance, slicing into the city's dying infrastructure. Power grids flickered, air vents sealed, access points collapsed under their control. Meanwhile, Marcus and Wyatt set the physical traps, detonations rigged in the right places to cut off the boogeyman's avenues of escape. They weren't hunting him anymore. They were forcing him into their battlefield. The city seemed to breathe around them. Every step felt like it echoed into the dark. Every shadow stretched too long. Every gust of wind carried the weight of unseen movement. Then it happened. Jack's calm flared to life. Movement. West Quadrant. He's adjusting. Marcus tightened his grip on his rifle. Good. A distant explosion rippled through the ruins as one of their traps detonated, collapsing a passageway. For the first time, the boogeyman had reacted instead of acted. Wyatt smirked. Bet that got his attention. Another detonation. Then another. Each one forcing him toward a single corridor, the only space left untouched. The kill zone. Jack's voice cut in. Hold up. The ground collapsed beneath Marcus. He hit hard, dust choking his lungs as debris rained down. His ears rang. Darkness swallowed the world. Movement. Fast. Silent. Marcus rolled, barely avoiding the knife that carved through the space where his throat had been. He lashed out, connecting with something solid, but the boogeyman twisted away before he could press the attack. No words this time. No taunts. Just intent. Marcus fired, but the boogeyman was already gone, shifting through the wreckage like a phantom. He wasn't running. He was adjusting, recalculating the hunt. Then he stopped. Just beyond the reach of the dim emergency light, a silhouette in the dust. Marcus froze. He saw the stance. The weight shift. A soldier. Not just trained, mastered. For the first time since the chase began, Marcus felt it. Not just tension. Not just adrenaline. Recognition. The boogeyman was like him. Then the figure moved again, vanishing into the ruins. But not before leaving something behind. Another mark. Another countdown. 1 hour. Marcus exhaled, his breath steady despite the hammering in his chest. He pushed himself up, blood trailing down his arm. This wasn't just a hunt anymore. This was a war between the last two predators standing. The hour passed in silence. No movement. No whispers. Just the weight of unseen eyes pressing in from the dark. The city had gone still, as if waiting for the final act to unfold. Marcus climbed out of the collapsed structure, his muscles aching, his rifle hanging loose in his grip. Wyatt and DeAndre were already in position, scanning the ruins with unspoken tension. Jack hovered over his data pad, jaw clenched. He's coming, Jack muttered. I can feel it. Marcus nodded. Then let's finish this. They had driven him into a dead zone, a stretch of ruined industrial space where the buildings had crumbled into skeletal remains. No tunnels, no exits. A space that forced one thing, a direct confrontation. The boogeyman was out of options. He had played the long game, testing them, breaking them down piece by piece. But now he had been cornered. Unless that had been his goal all along. Marcus checked his weapon, but he already knew how this would end. A blur of motion. Wyatt turned, raising his rifle, too late. A blade flashed, cutting through the barrel of his weapon, slicing deep into his arm. He hit the ground hard, gasping in pain. DeAndre fired. 3 shots, center mass. The boogeyman barely slowed. He pivoted, fluid and precise, twisting past the line of fire before striking low. The impact sent DeAndre sprawling, his rifle skidding across the ground. Marcus moved. Fast. His knife met resistance, metal, flesh, something between the two. The boogeyman twisted away, landing just outside Marcus's reach. For the first time, Marcus saw him clearly. He was human. No cybernetics, no alien augmentations. Just a man. Scarred lean, eyes hollow and unreadable. His gear was old, patched together from stolen tech and battlefield salvage. His face was streaked with dirt and dried blood, his expression unreadable. Jack had called it first. A soldier. But not just any soldier. A survivor. The boogeyman exhaled, rolling his shoulders, his stance shifting into something almost familiar. Finally, he said. Then he attacked. There was no hesitation, no wasted movement. He was fast, impossibly so, but Marcus had fought men like him before, ghosts, wraiths of war, men who had lived too long in the dark. The fight was brutal, raw. Every strike meant to end it. A knife skimmed past Marcus's ribs, slicing fabric and skin. He ignored it, drove forward, forced the boogeyman back with calculated strikes. The others were regaining their footing. Wyatt bleeding but steady. DeAndre, rifle back in his hands. Jack, silent, waiting for an opening. The boogeyman saw it too. He smiled. Then he moved, asterisk asterisk, not to kill, but to escape asterisk asterisk. Marcus lunged, catching his wrist, forcing him back. The boogeyman twisted, knife reversing in his grip. Asterisk asterisk, but Marcus had already seen the move before he made it asterisk asterisk. He slammed his elbow into the man's throat, stealing his breath. A second strike to the temple. A third just below the ribcage. The boogeyman staggered. For the first time, he looked human. Wyatt raised his rifle, aiming one-handed. Move. Marcus didn't. The boogeyman stared at him, something unreadable flickering behind his eyes. Then slowly he exhaled. You were better, he admitted. Marcus held his gaze. I had a team. The boogeyman's lips twitched, something close to a smirk, almost respect. Then Wyatt fired. The shot hit home. The boogeyman dropped, his body hitting the dust, his breath slow and shallow. Marcus crouched beside him, watching as the light faded from his eyes. No fear, no regret, just the quiet acceptance of a man who had finally lost the only battle that had ever mattered. Jack exhaled. Is he dead? Marcus checked for a pulse. Nothing. Yeah, he said. No one spoke. The wind carried the distant echoes of the city, the ruins settling into silence once more. DeAndre flexed his injured arm. Damn. Wyatt wiped blood from his jaw. Hell of a fight. Jack stared down at the body. You think he was always like this? Marcus didn't answer. He didn't need to. He already knew the truth. The boogeyman hadn't been born a monster. He had been made. Just like them. As they hauled the body onto their ship, an alien bounty hunter watched from shadows, his reptilian features tight with unease. What kind of man was he? The alien asked. Marcus lit a cigar, watching the smoke curl into the night. One of ours, he said. Then they left, and the city swallowed its ghosts once more.